that you did.
Call this meeting to order, the Southside Network Authority for May 9th. It's good to see everybody. Happy Friday. Thank you for providing lunch. I don't know who's responsible for that. Thank you, Chris. Great job. And we'll go ahead and get started with the roll call. Mr. Nixon, would you mind calling roll?
Ms. Ritter?
Here.
Chairman Buckles here.
Here.
Mr. Carter? Mr. Moore is going to be Ms. Wilson is going to be here. Mr. Fitzpatrick?
Here.
Ms. Whitesell is here. Mr. Hayes? Dr. Kay? And Mr. Walker?
Here.
All right. Thank you, sir. Now we will approve the agenda that was sent out. You all have a copy in front of you as well. Looking for a motion to approve the agenda as presented. Ms. Ritter? Ms. Ritter she has signified by her hand that she moved because she's eating.
Right,
Anybody
she's
else?
chewing and her mother's ghost would
Thank you. It's been seconded by Mr. Wallace. Any discussion? All those in favor for approving the agenda signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? All righty. Public comments. Are there any folks here to provide public comments today? I see none. Were there any submitted previously? All right. Okay, the meeting minutes are the next agenda item for approval. I'm looking for a motion to approve the April 11th meeting minutes.
So moved.
Thank you, Dr. Kay. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Wallace. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of approving the April 11th minutes signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Now we get to the good stuff. Executive Director update. Mr. Nixon.
So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Ryan and give us a brief construction update.
So Danella has been making significant progress with their permitting, especially in Virginia Beach. So we've got some information so we can start with the redesign there. Railroads are moving along as well. We actually had a couple of railroads that were completed in Suffolk and North Fork as well. So those crosses are being timely. We were talking with rail pros as well, pretty much on a weekly basis to make sure we're going to push those stuff through. Right now, Janella is prepping for crews to come back into market, additional crews. They're potholing in preparation for those crews to come in and start putting in additional conduits in certain areas, and also pulling fiber at this point and begin splicing. That's all they have, but Janella has been doing a great job updating us, particularly in regards to what's happening in the field week over week, and they're making some different progress.
Any questions? Okay. Go Virginia Gray.
Turn it back to you.
Okay, awesome. So we met virtually with a team from Go Virginia. That was 3 weeks ago, approximately. Myself, Mr. Lyon, and Mr. DeBerry. And Mr. DeBerry made a great presentation. Marcellus was on a plane, but he was texting from the plane, finding out what was going on. And I'm happy to report earlier today, we received an email saying that we were successful in the award grant. The planning grant request was unanimously approved by the Region 5 Council on April 24th. There will be a timing issue in terms of when the funding will be available because while we do the limited amount of funding from our per capita allocation that can be applied to planning grants, the state confirmed we have to wait until the new fiscal year begins July 1 to upload the application into the state system. Then that will be reviewed by the staff at the state level at DHCD mid to late July, but I don't think that's a problem. And that, just to summarize, could you explain again what our request was?
We requested funds to perform, you guys have heard me talk about the asset assessment, the needs assessment. So basically secure funds to begin the asset assessment process. So
$100,000.
$100,000. And if I may, Madam Chair, there were a number of people in this room, Mr. Crump being one of them, and others who helped put together information for this grant. It was not just me, it was not just the chair, or Mr. DeBerry, or Mr. Lyon. It was a true collaborative effort, and it was a pleasure to work on. It's a lot of work, I'm not gonna lie, but when it's collaborative like this, it definitely makes it easy. So, thank you.
Thank you. I would say the process as well, you reached out to a lot of regional players,
Yes.
and it was a great opportunity for you to introduce yourself.
Yes, I learned a tremendous amount. It became an obsession for me after a while. I was spending nights and weekends because every time I read something, I find something out, I meet someone, and then I go down another area that I didn't know anything about. So it was great. It was a great experience.
Congratulations. Thank you. Thank you for all your hard work too. Okay, great. Well, that's good news. Then we get to take a trip back down memory lane for our next item. As we did last month, we're taking a look at some of the foundational documents that formed the Southside Network Authority. This week, we're going to be talking about the project participation agreement. And both Marcellus and Mike Blackaby will be presenting that, and we'll go through that in detail. As noted, this was signed February 1st, 2022, so a little over 3 years old, and there's some opportunities to update it, as we will discuss. Marcellus?
Thank you. So I'm going to run through this. I'm not going to go through it in detail. You have the presentation in front of you. I'm going to hit the highlights. I'm going to ask for Mr. Lockley's help, as the chair said. So let's start with the first slide. I know it's a little hard to read, but you have your presentations in front of you. So,
Marcellus, can I ask you a question?
yes.
Could you speak with your outside voice a little bit?
What's the outside?
You and
mean
Stephen have
yell?
this, yes.
Okay.
We need you to be a little louder.
Okay.
I don't know if you
People
are.
in the background.
Yeah.
Project.
Okay. Okay, so the purpose of this agreement was to provide a financial structure and a system of understanding for long-term management and capital financing of the Southside Network Authority. So for the background, if I can ask Mr. Lockley to help me out with slide number 3 on the background.
So, to give a bit of background, so this happened after the 5 cities had decided to self-finance the regional connectivity ring from the cash on hand, and that was a wonderful thing to have happen. However, that left a couple of long-term questions open. We didn't want to wind up in a situation where there were lots of side agreements and special rights and different things. I think the mantra that I heard from Ms. Weitzel was, don't make this like SIPSUP, as much as we all love our next door neighbors here. And to that point also, to make sure that we were having adequate funding for replacements and ongoing maintenance going forward, at least to keep the assets that we had on hand in good form and good order. So the objective was to have a way to set up an internal revenue cascade where we didn't just take the money and push it into whatever we felt was necessary at any given time, but we had a plan for, this is the first thing we're going to fund, this is the second thing we're going to fund, this is the third thing that we're going to fund, and on a rough time period, in order to give some comfort that this wasn't going to be a situation where it just needed to be done again because everything fell apart over 20 years. I say parenthetically, I have concerns that that's what's going to happen with body, is that we'll be doing the same program again in 20 years because nobody's going to actually maintain the facilities that the state paid to put in. In any event, that was the original rationale, was to be good stewards of what we were in the process of building.
Okay, so we're going to start with Article 2. Thank you, Chair. We're going to start with Article 2. So this is basically reiterating what Mr. Lockerbie has already said. So, and the sentence reads, I'll just read this one. Authority shall, either through its own forces or contractors, of course we know we have a P3 agreement with GTS, acquire, construct, equip, finance, operate, maintain, market, and manage the project. So we're doing a lot of this today with the participation of our P3 partner. So the project committee. So this committee has not been established yet. We'll talk about this in a lot more detail as we go through this agreement. So this committee is delegated the full power from the board to act. I won't read everything, but just organizing, acquisition of infrastructure, approving agreements like IRUs or individual rights of use, or use sharing agreements like right-of-way. This committee is to consist of one appointee from each one of the participating members. So each one of the member cities has one member on this committee. And then...
and it should be noted that it's not that the committee has absolutely every piece of power over everything. There are what we call non-delegable legislative decisions that are held exclusively by the board, and for those, the participation committee can make recommendations, but it's ultimately up to the board to make the decision. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, we're going to get to that later.
Well, the lawyers around here are going to get on fire if we don't clarify that.
Yes. So each participating member can also be a voting member as well. This committee can establish its own bylaws, but they must be approved, Mr. Lockerbie's point, by the board. And we are authorized to appoint a chair, a vice chair, and a secretary/treasurer.
The committee has a treasurer?
That's what it says.
Which is almost certainly going to be the same treasurer.
Yes.
Okay.
A little redundant, but it's there. Yep. So, and this is exactly what Mr. Lockerbie said earlier about non-delegable legislative functions. So, setting a budget, which is a big part of what the authority does now, kind of informally without this committee, and then approving issuance of authority obligations, and then approving acquisition for real estate or municipal franchise agreements, or agreements like the P3 agreement that we have with GTS. So on the next page, we have conversation, a mention of the financial aspects, which is shares, and then the in-kind contributions. Each member is offered 20 shares. This structure was put in place, but this is not the way that the authority is working and the member cities are working today, because each member contributed an equal amount of $5 million apiece.
This was designed so that we could deal with the possibility that we wound up with differing ratios of contributions toward the RCR.
Then does it need to stay?
No.
Yeah,
So
we're
that's
gonna,
what we're going to talk about.
yeah, we're going to talk about that a little later too. So then grants.
Just before, I know we're going to talk about later, I often thought, if we're going to bring in other member cities, we need this to stay.
And I think the very short answer is that I think that the concept is very useful. I don't think it's necessary in this particular project participation agreement. Frankly, this project participation agreement concept was stolen from RIFAs, where typically there will be one project and the localities will buy into that project in different ratios using a share system. And that was where I stole this from when I drafted it, but it just turned out not to be necessary for this one, but there might be future projects in which it makes sense to do it that way.
And just real quickly, also, to your point, Catherine, it's really important that we're talking about this now because we need to get our house in order
Yeah.
before we consider inviting in some additional roommates.
Yes. That's a good way to put it.
Right.
Okay, so next, grants. Authority shall seek grant opportunities regarding capturing our first grant. And then talks about member contribution, unreasonably withhold or delay their support for that grant. And then grants, they give purposes in which they can be used. So you'll see in this third bullet, a debt service reserve fund. So we're going to be talking about funds here in detail in the next couple of slides. So agreement to finance, this just lays out the general provisions. Authority may use a combination of cash, debt, or initial cost of acquiring, constructing, equipping the project, and providing working capital for the operations. And again, we talk about, there's a reference to shares. Here you again have a reference to the project committee. If you read through this agreement, it was basically made for that project committee to kind of be the backbone that provides counsel to the board for all the decisions on the way that the authority runs. On the next slide, this is a continuation of the agreement to finance. All obligations are authorized in which the board issues of the obligations of the authority, only unless also entered or guaranteed by one or more members. Cash reserve. So this agreement specifies 3 funds. The debt service fund is the first one. The cash reserve piece are one of the key components of this agreement, in my opinion. There's a second one, we'll get to that in a minute. But it talks about what these 3 funds are used for. And these are typical funds for what you would see on any municipal project. Any questions on the debt service fund in particular? Okay. Then we have the operating reserve fund, which is kind of the fund that we've been using to run the SNA on. And as you can see, it's adjusted to contain operating and maintenance expenses approximating the cost of operations for 90 days. That's what the goal of this fund is. And then the next fund is the capital reserve fund, or the sinking fund. And basically what this allows us to do is to expand the infrastructure or perform maintenance or add additional infrastructure. It also protects us in a situation where we have infrastructure that is destroyed. So for example, a thunderstorm comes through. I know we have insurance policy on the infrastructure, but we would need to replace that infrastructure ASAP. Insurance policy is not going to help you when you have customers and they have their live traffic flowing over the infrastructure and it's gone. It needs to be fixed right then and there. So this is what this one helps. So then we have transfer of shares. Again, this is talking about language back from earlier in the agreement about how the shares are offered. And if one entity was to pull out of the agreement, these shares would be offered to the remaining entities or the remaining participating entities. It talks about the impact of withdrawal upon a partial or complete withdrawal, proportional voting, and all of the matters allocated by the share ownership are reallocated. And then we get down to the setting of the annual budget, which is the second part that I mentioned earlier of the meat of this agreement. on or before 15 January, provide proposed next fiscal year annual budget. We just went through this about 5 or 6 months ago now. So, and this is to cover the cost of operation and maintenance, any debt service costs, or capital expenditures. So in the case now, that's going towards construction of the infrastructure.
Marcel, excuse me.
Yeah.
The setting the annual budget is done by the project committee or done by the board?
It is set by the project committee and the board.
So the project committee is somewhat of a working board.
Yes.
And this authority would be more of a policy budget.
Capital management and replacement funds. So again, we're talking about the capital improvement funds. So capital improvements talks about maintaining the inventory of assets and depreciation status, the useful life, replacement cost, and the budget for the sinking fund. Quarterly report on the budget. We've been reporting on the budget. Mr. DeBerry has set the precedent where we report every month on the board meeting day. So we've been abiding by this for a lot more frequently than is specified in the agreement. And then forecasting. The authority shall develop policy for forecasting its revenues, expenditures over a period of up to 5 years beyond the then current fiscal year. And we routinely monitor and revise as necessary. So for example, a revision would be, we've added infrastructure, so we need to revise the forecast. And it talks about books and accounts. So governmental accounting standards boards is the standard that we use. And then we talk about a fiscal agent. So the authority may contract with any member jurisdiction or regional organization or qualified entity to act as its fiscal agent upon such terms and conditions as board and the fiscal agent agree. So again, this puts the ownership and the authority back to the board.
Which is, we currently have an agreement with HRPDC to provide a variety of administrative assistance operations, I believe, including being the fiscal agent. Is that right, Bob?
That's
Yeah.
correct.
That's what that was designed to accommodate.
And then we talk about liability insurance. I mentioned this earlier. And this is also in the P3 agreement that we talked about last month to ensure the infrastructure in case something happens. Procurement, pretty basic, no funds spent or expended without a purchase order or contract requiring payment.
Does that say no funds can be spent without
Yes.
purchase order? Okay.
Yep. And then we have audit. We are coming up on an audit period as we speak. Keelan and I were talking about this earlier today. That the audit will require an entity to audit all of our financial accounts. And this is conducted using, let's talk about earlier, the generally accepted accounting and auditing standards. And the audit board or the audit entity shall transmit the results to each member city and to the board. Fees for dark fiber. So we talked about the dark fiber details as it relates to DTS. This again mentions the project committee shall actively market the dark fiber. So as you can see, we have some, this agreement was signed in 22, but the P3 agreement was signed in 23. So we have some overlapping here. So when we were talking about making changes to the agreement, this might be one area where we need to perform some cleanup. And then again, it talks about fees for dark fiber. The project committee may offer lit fiber services to the public upon approval by the board with act. And I would say, that again, as I was saying earlier, the main thing here is we have to be cognizant of the fact that we have with our P3 partner an exclusivity agreement, an extended, and then extended exclusivity agreement. So having to work around those pieces of agreement with those in mind with this part as well. Makes it a little bit challenging, but it can be done. Contributions and distributions. Members shall pay taxes, fees, charges, or receive distributions from net revenues. We're going to talk about this in detail earlier. We talked about if there's an anticipated deficit, what happens there, and also a surplus. And then strategic planning. Again, the project committee is mentioned. The project committee shall submit to the board not more than 12 months after the agreement a strategic plan for achieving goals and for future expansion. And development committee shall consider without limitation the economic needs of the region and market demand and what have you. So the key takeaways that I would like for the board to take away from this participation agreement is revenue. We'll talk about that more in detail later. The need to prioritize fiscal structure development. If you look at this agreement and what we have in place, we have some gaps that we need to cover. And then the participation agreement, as Mr. Lockerbie said earlier, we need to perform some cleanup on this agreement based on the current situation. And that's the end of the presentation.
So, any questions? It's a lot to cover. I think as we go through the update on this, we'll get into some of the nitty-gritty, but I'll be really curious about that revenue piece, how that would be handled in the future, because it's pretty high level at this point. And at this point, it's also the only revenue at this point we'll be getting is from our P3 partners. So it doesn't really matter right now, but it is something that we're going to have to think about as we potentially bring on more roommates, as I said. But in terms of the project committee, that sounds like that needs to be stood up sooner rather than later, assuming we're going to continue with this as is. Do you have any recommendations there? Or?
Yeah, I have some people that I would like to see on that project committee, but it's a board decision. So each one of the participating members needs to have at least one person on that committee. And I would like in the short term for us to meet once a week until we get to a good point. But that committee we have a lot of work to do.
Mr. Lockerbie.
Yes, ma'am.
Is that, because it's a project committee, can that committee meet virtually? And what sort of restrictions are there for that committee versus as an authority?
It's considered to be a public body, but the rules that it has to follow are less strict than, say, the governing body of the city, but they do still have open meeting rules and a limitation on the number of electronic meetings that they can have every year and those sorts of things. Yeah, and just by way of example of what I have seen happen, my firm represents the Western Virginia RIFA, and what we do is once a month, just like we do here, they have a meeting, and it's 2 hours of project committee meetings, and then they have a 1 hour board meeting to go over big picture policy stuff.
So
and
one
it
trip?
works pretty. Yeah, because of course it's basically populated by city managers and county administrators from all over the Roanoke Valley, and they want to do it just once a month rather than have meetings broken up too much.
The
Although-
project committee, they're the same members as the board.
It's not. There are some of the same members, but it's not entirely. You might see RIFAs being economic development oriented. You might see the county administrator be on the board of directors, but then the economic development director or the community development director be the person who's on the participation committee.
And are there also meeting requirements of notice, minutes, et cetera?
Yep.
Well, I think meeting once a week is going to be challenging. I'm sorry, Marcellus. I don't know how realistic that is, and I know it's a great idea, but I think it's going to be, especially if it can't be virtual, that's going to be it's going to be too difficult.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So I think it would be helpful, so when this agreement and project committee was conceived, the SNA had one employee, the executive director, now it has two. What is the difference in roles between, and I know some of this we just went through, but project committee, board, project committee versus board versus SNA staff versus the P3 partners? That's sort of question one. And then two, for Marcellus, you said there's a lot of work for the project committee to do, meet once a week. What outcome would be achieved for the project committee to turn the corner where the bulk of that work is done and we don't need to meet once a week? I think that would just be helpful to conceive all this.
Yeah, so we have some items that we're going to move to closed session to talk in detail about the project committee. I can't give you a time frame. I can tell you what needs to be done and however long it takes us to accomplish those things, we can then move to a once a month. But we can definitely make it once a week. We just have to hopefully accomplish more in the meetings that we have and the time that we have. So you asked the question, your first question. The way I see the board is there for compliance and also for strategic guidance. That's what the board's job is, right? The SNA staff is there to execute on the operational aspects of the SNA. That's their role. And then you asked about the project committee. The project committee is feeding information to the board about the strategic direction of the organization and how it affects the member cities. So the biggest gap that I think we have right now is the economic development directors for each one of the member cities. That's the biggest gap. We need more participation to hear from them. The project committee does, and then we can basically put together plans or make recommendations to the board on their behalf. I hope that makes sense.
Right now, the project participation committee is a little bit redundant with the board because we have only one project. But you could definitely see how, let's say, Southampton, Sussex, and Isle of Wight County decide that they want to join the board and build, or join the authority and build a giant ring out there using primarily their money. We might have a separate project participation committee. So it's designed for potential expansions with different capital buy-ins, basically.
Okay. And the project committee is feeding information to this board?
Yes.
From
Be careful with that verb.
feeding?
Feeding, informing,
Sharing.
sharing, informing.
I was quoting Marcellus.
Okay, feeding is not a good word for an elected person.
No, that's a really
With
good point.
conspiracy theory experience.
So sharing,
Words matter, right?
Right?
sharing information with the board. So the information sharing with the board, though, is coming through you, Marcellus, right? At these monthly meetings and in between?
Yeah, but as you guys have seen, although I try, I can't be everywhere at the same time. So I need help from a committee, right? I have ideas, as you guys well know, about where we want to take this organization, but there are several ways to get there, right? So if we have a project committee with representation from each one of the member cities, they can provide or share information on how their particular entity is feeling about how we're doing, or what approach we're taking.
I could see there being different committees, an economic development committee, project committee that deals with sort of the capital project, strategic, I mean, I could see different committees.
Finance committee?
Finance committee. I don't see necessarily one committee doing all of that. I don't think that's reasonable. And the type of expertise you need for each of those areas, it should be staffed that way. So if we had an economic development committee, that makes a lot of sense, and then we would have our economic development folks participate in that.
Sure.
But does that make sense to you guys? That seems to be probably a better way of setting it up. I think what you're saying is you need the member cities to provide more input and assistance than just showing up once a month.
Yes.
Is that,
Exactly.
can I just
That's exactly what.
summarize, whether it comes in this form or another form?
So I guess, forget all of this, that Mike's, excellent work Mike has done in the past. If you were starting from day one, would you have a project committee or would you have a different level of staff?
I would have I would set it up basically what the chair is recommending. So we have different areas. I'll talk about finance, right? And we can try to cobble together some structure, but it would really be cool to have a committee that's specifically helping us with finance, of which we would ask you to be on.
So I have a day job, but now I have two.
You should have known better.
I know. And that's my concern, I think it's probably where Laura's going to. There's a difference between additional staff to kind of help you just make this thing work, and a bunch of people who come together even once a week, on part brain cells, or not in my case today. So I just want to make sure that if we're going to restructure this, we do it in a way that's going to work for the future, not something that's also going to be another meeting that we're all going to and going, now what did you need today, more stuff?
And if the SNA team, Marcellus and Warren, are not getting information from departments of the agencies here, you have the highest level people around this table, so we can fix that.
Could I ask a more basic question? Is this the precursor to redoing the bylaws?
No. We have a couple of small edits today that we're going to vote on, which we discussed previously, but not a complete rehaul.
Okay, I have a very different view of bylaws, probably than most. I think they should be very general, and there should be a policy and procedure document that would encompass much of what is being talked in here, so that it's flexible. The board can go in and change things without all the required legal notice of bylaws. So maybe this is the appropriate time to do that.
So I would see a governance committee that reviews the bylaws and provides that.
Yeah, leave me off that, would you?
I think maybe,
Those drive me crazy.
maybe rather than say project committee, if we can identify the gaps which you need help from the member cities, and then we can come back and then structure those committees. And in that sense, it might not be every city provides somebody for the finance committee. It could be.
Yeah, committees are not provided for in the bylaws, and I would not recommend that they be.
I agree.
Yeah, because they would, resolution of the board, let's have a committee to do this. There's no need for us to have.
And I don't know
I'm
about
sorry,
the
can you explain
project.
what you, I don't understand what you just said. Are you saying that we can't have committees or
No,
just?
no, no, you can't. They're not provided for in the bylaws, which means that a resolution of the board can create a committee at any time.
Okay,
And cancel.
got it, understood.
Well, maybe the staff folks here can come up with a good outline and how to get input from the economic development people, the finance people. It may be 2 meetings, where there's an introductory meeting and then an input meeting of how best to, I don't know that, but there isn't a staff person in this room that probably isn't overwhelmed with meetings. So, you're waving, you're not a staff person.
I apologize.
Huh?
You have some ideas, Bob?
I just want to suggest, and Madam Chair, if I may, I apologize, Ms. Whitman. Along the lines of being overwhelmed with meetings, I might be able to help. So on a monthly basis, Doug Smith and I convene the region's economic development directors. Doug Smith from the Alliance. Marcellus next month will be in this room. I might recommend that I queue up Marcellus to be on that agenda. We could do an introduction to all the economic development directors in Marcellus. We've done that with others, but we haven't gotten there yet. And then maybe perhaps Marcellus could ask them the best way to get that detailed input that he needs. And then they can, that might be a suggestion how we might go forward.
I think that's a great suggestion, and being time sensitive, do they all attend?
They do. Out of 17, we average about 14 every meeting.
Well, I mean, the 5 that are here.
Yes, the 5 here are really.
Okay, I mean, the other 12, at this point, are immaterial to what we're, sorry, Al, don't you agree?
Just go ahead.
I mean, at this point, it's the 5 that are represented here that really count. But my suggestion would be communicate with them beforehand so that when you make your presentation, they'll be ready to have valuable input for you with a little bit of background information of what you might be asking for. Then it may, they're all busy too, and we don't want them to put this to the side of their desk. So if they know ahead of time, they may be ready to respond a little bit.
And maybe instead of having another meeting for economic development directors, if the regional ring was a regular part of that meeting, so that they constantly were hearing, hey, where we are, what's going on, how much fiber's been pulled, where it's running. And it's more on the radar because it's part of their regular meeting as opposed to having to have a separate whole meeting.
It's a good idea.
Okay, I think we got that. So what I'm hearing is you don't have a lot of support for a weekly program project committee. Sorry.
We are here to help you.
Now, I meet with Marcellus once a week, by the way. That's why he and I meet every week, but.
I'm just trying to optimize the response that
Absolutely.
Marcellus will get instead of the, I'm too busy to come.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe we could come up with a structure if there are some committees that we'd like to stand up specifically and then come back next month with that recommendation of what those look like and how you would staff them.
And building on Mike's comment, it doesn't need to change the participation agreement necessarily, it just needs to say, here's the finance committee.
Well, we do have to change the participation agreement because we've adopted it that says that we do have a project committee and that's never actually been created. So that has to be, among other things, yeah.
Was that to oversee the construction?
I think when we did this, Debbie, at that point, we didn't have a P3 partner. And we were trying to determine who was going to be in charge of everything. So we recognized that there had to be some capability to do all of these things. And then we went down the P3 route, and then we just sort of forgot about the project committee. Now, we do have a P3 partner. GTS is doing most of this, but we still have more functional board and authority member requirements that we probably aren't doing as much as we could.
And when Mike and I talked about this early on, it was that these other two cities want to come on, and they're going to have a project committee to do their ring, and they will connect. And so it was more to provide that structure that newer pieces of the ring would have its own project committee that then all report up to the board.
Okay.
Because of my ancient brain cells fire.
And just like the REFA structure where you might have a project in York County, a project in Chesapeake, and a project in Gloucester, and each one might have different participants who are participating and putting money into the infrastructure, and then after you've paid all of your costs of debt, potentially getting revenue out of that. That's more like.
Do we have to, well, I know we know we have to amend this. Do we take that piece out, or the way it is written, we amend it to recognize how we're operating?
Well, in order to change that agreement, that agreement would require a vote of each of the councils of the 5 member cities. And the reason why we set it up that way, there was a good reason for that, was because it does provide for the potential of taking on debt as either a short or long-term matter in order to finance things related to the ring. And a creditor is far more likely to take seriously something that councils have acted upon than something that our board adopted as a policy.
I completely agree. Going back, who made the clear comment about Simpson?
I think it's been attributed to me, but
Don't hide over there. That's, you know, the buy-in from the elected bodies is important. So I don't see any problem with taking an amended agreement back. Whether they read it or not is a different story. But are you nodding your head over there, Mr. Technology?
But then I have
Yes.
a follow-up.
Go ahead.
Mr. Hayes?
I just want to, I guess, make a comment that from what I'm hearing coming from our executive director, maybe I'm wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, is I'm starting to hear a lot of preliminary ideas about what might come, whether it's the joining of the peninsula or some of the other areas going west, those localities. And if these little projects start to come, I think from what I'm saying, what I'm hearing, we need to make sure that there are certain things that we're taking care of first to kind of shore ourselves up before more water starts to be added to, coming into the boat, so to speak.
We don't want any more water coming in the boat.
So I think we use the house analogy used earlier. We're going to get this thing built, but he's telling you what we need to do if we're going to get it built timely. So you can have a plan that we're going to move into this house one day when it gets built. But if you don't have the contractors, if you don't have people coming, he sees that, in order for us to meet a certain time frame, we're not adding crews. You can either add the crews or add the meetings or get subdivision in order to get us here to this point. And if we don't, the work will be done less frequently, which is going to push the timeline out for everyone. So we have to, I think, consider all of that. The decision isn't just if we're going to get going with this committee and meet frequently. The decision is, do we want to push things to a point where it becomes a delay and it's way, way out. You either put the resources in now, the resources not meaning money, but people and time and coming to the meeting more frequently, or those meetings still have to be had. They'll just get pushed out. And everything, I guess it's the forewarning that don't be mad if it's not as soon as we all wanted it to be.
I think that's a
I don't know
great,
if I'm
Yeah,
right or wrong.
Mr. Hayes, you nailed it. You nailed it.
So the committee would be of staff or elected officials from other cities, from the member cities?
Staff, of course.
Staff, okay. And
nice try.
the committee will expedite the progress of the completion of the ring?
Well, that's already being done. It's,
Yeah.
I think what we need is a clear determination of what you need from this committee to do
Yeah,
specifically.
what does success look like?
Yeah, what does success look like? And from there, we can determine what might, who staffs it, you know, et cetera. So just a real,
Since I'm sitting far enough away from Laura, she can't actually hit me. I'd like to suggest that we table this.
Yeah.
And Laura and I meet with Marcellus and we work through the details of what success looks like and what the structures could be.
love that.
I actually have on the proposal.
After next Tuesday.
DCMs unite.
Basically, dated in the future to talk about this very thing that we're talking about right now.
So why don't we, thank you for volunteering yourselves.
Catherine.
If you never see me again.
I think that's great, and we do want to help you be successful, and it's also, to your point, Mr. Hayes, and I made this reference the last meeting, I'm going to say it again, and Laura, you also said this, if you all need something from your member cities, and you're not getting it, then we need to know about that,
Yeah.
and we will help, because if that's, and it also means, if you have a phone call or an email from Marcellus, I need you guys to return it in a timely manner. If you can. So I know everybody's really busy in budget season right now.
Well, in addition though, because I do think this is lacking a piece right now, is I would say we should also follow through with Mr. Crumb's suggestion about the economic development meeting as soon as Marcellus thinks it's appropriate. And then let them bring you feedback so you can decide the best next steps and recommend them. Good. When do you meet with them?
June 5 in this room, so Marcellus, I can get you on that agenda.
Yes, please. June
Thank you.
5 would be great.
I think that's going to definitely be one thing. Another thing, we're going to talk about this at the next meeting, but I'll give you a little teaser, is going to be, I think, something that you all will be excited about, which is the idea of how do we, as each of our cities, start to see some cost savings as a result of this grant, because
Don't let Laura volunteering for anything for a minute.
so
Well,
with
since
that,
you just volunteered her, I did not leave the room.
Unfortunately, I got it.
poor Catherine. Now we're going to go into closed session on that note. So Mr. Lockerbie, do you have language?
Yeah, and we were going to flip 7 and 8, is that right? On the
Yes.
agenda? So I believe, Madam Chair, that you were looking for a motion for a closed session pursuant to subsection A6 of section 2.2-3711 of the Code of Virginia of 1950 as amended, called the Code, relating to the investment of public funds where competition or bargaining is involved, where, if made public initially, the financial interest of the authority would be affected relating to financial requirements for future confidential projects. And pursuant to subsection A33 of section 2.2-3711 of the Code, relating to discussion or consideration of confidential proprietary information and trade secrets subject to the exclusion in subdivision 19 of section 2.2-3705.6 of the Code, relating to financing of confidential projects where disclosure of such information would be harmful to the competitive position of the authority.
Do you want two motions or one?
And I was going to add in all board members, including alternates, are desired, as is the executive director of HRPDC, the special assistant to the executive director, the deputy executive director, the general counsel. Is there anybody else? Do we want? CIOs.
We have our assistant director of our IT2,
Is that?
Yeah, that's fine.
That's added to the motion.
Yeah.
I'll make that motion.
Ms. Ritter has moved. The
To
motion go to closed session.
8A.
And is there a second? Second by Mr. Moore. Thank you very much. Any discussion? All those, we have to do a roll call vote?
This is just a majority.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, we're in closed session, so we'll out of closed session.
Yes, Madam Chair, I believe that you're looking for a motion to certify by a roll call vote that to the best of each member of the Board of Directors' knowledge, 1, only public business matters lawfully exempted from the open meeting requirements of the Freedom of Information Act, and 2, only such public business matters as were identified in the motion to convene the closed session were heard, discussed, or considered during the closed session.
Thank you. Is there a motion to that extent?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Morris.
Second.
Moved and properly seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll do a roll call vote. Trustee Connell?
Ms. Ritter?
Yes.
Chairman Cohen?
Yes.
Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Ms. Fitzpatrick? Ms. Whitesell is here.
Do you really get to vote?
Well, Virginia Beach and Portsmouth do, because their representatives aren't
Mr.
present.
Wallace.
Mr. Wallace?
Yes.
Mr. Hayes? Did you ask for Mr. Hayes?
Oh, Mr. Hayes,
Yes.
Great. Okay, we are out of closed session. We are in. Back to the agenda, we have an item that we've talked about a few times, the adoption of the revised bylaws and policies. There is an attachment, and this just reflects the bylaws being adopted to allow us remote participation.
Correct. It updates the remote participation policies to reflect the most recent legislation from the General Assembly, and also in response to some recent court cases, and at the suggestion of Ms. Ritter and Ms. Wilson, it adds to the provisions on closed session that no person may record any portion in writing or by audio or video recording, and that if a person attends a closed session electronically, he or she may not permit any person to be present in the room where they are actually located, or where any other person may overhear the proceedings unless disclosed and approved as part of the motion to convene a closed session. There was also an explicit, I also at your suggestion, Ms. Ritter, add an explicit mention of the board being able to create policies to implement or otherwise address matters as appropriate.
Any questions? Okay, we've been talking about this for a while, so it'd be good to get this properly voted upon. So is there a motion to adopt the changes to the bylaws as presented?
I guess I would.
Thank you.
It's just a motion.
I know. Thank you. It's
Now,
been
you
moved-
should be making all these motions.
It's been moved by Ms. Ritter. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of adopting the revised bylaws and policies signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Is there any old business for the authority to discuss? Is there any new business? I have a new business item, but I didn't open it up to, is there anything, anybody else? Do you want to present it? Or shall I?
Yes.
Okay.
So I received an email earlier in the week about the Etheridge Lakes Data Center in Chesapeake. So I wanted to open that discussion up to the board, to receive your guidance on how we should proceed. They've asked us for a letter of support specific to their data center. So I just wanted to throw it out to the board, to see how we feel about that, and if not, or if so, how should we best proceed?
Any comments?
Well, I will, of course. I think the most appropriate response, since I'm a member of this authority and then have to vote on an individual application, I think the best approach might be to write a letter reflecting the board's position on data centers in the region. And maybe if one paragraph discussion of what the actual function of the data center is, if that's possible. I don't know if you possibly put it in a paragraph. But to make clear in the letter that this is separate and distinct from a land use issue that may have, that a legislative body would decide. That it would reflect the position of siting data centers in the region and what their value is. But I would make it clear and use that very clear language that land use and zoning decisions are legislative discretionary based on a locality's government.
Mr. Lockerbie is nodding in agreement, I think.
I'm nodding really hard. My neck is getting painful from how hard I'm nodding at what you're
Do you
saying.
need to
So are you, Mr. Lockerbie, I'm assuming that's because you think that we should stay out of those decisions, but we could just say in general that we, as an authority, support the data centers in the region? Is that-
And I think that also from the marketing perspective, we would love to serve your data center if in
Right.
the future you have any need for such things. But as Ms. Ritter says, there are legislative decisions that get made by council that you would have to vote on and that you can't pre-signal what your position would be. And the general concept of data centers, you might be, these are a good thing, but any individual one might not be.
It has to do with the site and location, and all the other local governmental discretionary.
So Marcellus, would you, maybe we could work with Mr. Lockerbie on drafting a letter?
Take it away.
I don't think we, are you all comfortable if I work with Marcellus on this and we send it off, or do you need, okay?
I don't want to be involved in drafting.
Part of the letter craft.
Well,
Plausible deniability.
Yes, sir.
You could have maybe Bob also part of that letter crafting.
Yes, thank you.
Sorry to put you there.
You've been voluntold.
Bob's great.
Yeah, but
Any other new business items? Yes, Bob?
I just wanted to say, Marcellus and I talked about that. I think that's an important, and thank you for giving direction. We think we're going to get more requests like this, right? And I think it's important that we handle them all consistently as these data centers start to locate in our region and give them Marcellus that guidance. I think it's very helpful. So thank you.
But the key again is the land use decisions, because if we fought so hard to keep losing some of that enrichment this past year when it dealt with solar farms and other items of that nature. So we need to protect our localities' decision-making rights as it relates to the enrichment.
Absolutely.
those rears don't give us any more mandates, because we know where you live. I do.
Like you lock it, we don't know.
So if there's no further new business, actually I should also offer, I think Chris left, congratulations to the PDC on, now you have, is it 4 EV chargers?
We do. Our parking lot is functionally complete. We have a few more amenities coming in that you'll hopefully see over the next couple of months. But yeah, very excited about it. So
Congratulations. The next
zero
one-
discharge for our parking lot for stormwater runoff. And yeah, it's been an
You
exciting
mean you're no
project.
longer going to pay a bill?
Well, I stepped into that one.
Yes, you did.
So the next meeting will be held here on June 13th. Nice to see all of you here. Happy Memorial Day. In the meantime, I'm wearing my white pants early just to celebrate. And did you have anything? You look like you were, that's it, okay.
No.
Okay.
No.
Thanks, everybody, for being here. Thanks to all the staff who are here, too, for helping us and supporting us. And this meeting's adjourned.